and then we come back to, one more thing. Anyway, the head and the hands are above, and this is the heart. We want strong hands. We want good heads, clear heads, thinkers. But we also need big hearts, and our hearts have to be strengthened by our living from Christ. Otherwise, we fall into this, again, irreligioso, solicitudo pro Deo, blasphemous anxiety to do God's work for Him. And we don't want that. We want Him working through us. Now let's turn to Luke 10, and we'll have, how much time do I have? What time do I need to finish? Oh, we're sailing well today. Good. Excellent. Like I mentioned, this is a passage in Luke 10 that talks about our mission, our ministry, and our master. Usually, it's clear once we get our master, our ministry and our mission become clear. I used to tell students, the guys, that once you get that if you get your mate, you find your mate, you'll soon find you now have your master, and she'll make your mission and your everything else clear from that. But as Luke writes here, this is, and we won't read the whole passage. We'll jump around a little bit, but he starts out with this story of the 72 of the mission of sending of the 70, where there's this desire both in the proclamation aspect of Jesus' ministry to prepare the way, and then to send them out to minister to the masses. Can we flip the lights on? We're not going to need the overhead. Make it easier for me. One of my thorns in the flesh are extremely bad eyes, so I've asked the Lord 3 times, actually more, that they be taken away. But I'm glad He's left the eyes there. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of Him in every town and place where He was about to go. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into His harvest field. Go, I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves." There's a ton of messages in there, but I just want to focus in on a few things. Jesus gives us 2 facts here. There's another fact I just saw, but and the first one is, and what I'm saying are some important things. They're not necessarily profound. That in the passage is that he says that the harvest itself is plentiful. We don't always believe that because we don't always see that, but he's saying there are souls out there that are ready to respond. There are certainly souls that have great need, and there's a lot of them. It's plentiful. And I think he makes a point of stating that because we don't see with spiritual eyes. We don't see with his eyes. Germany's not a real open country to the gospel in most ways. Where I'm living right now, Israel is certainly not open. The hardest country I have worked in campus ministries, it's actually is Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, particularly Prague. The students there, that is the most spiritually difficult place. I like the students, but they don't have a category for spiritual life. There's a lot of reasons for that. Israel, you talk with students at the University of Haifa, they have interest in spiritual things. Usually it's New Age, or it's Kabbalah, or some real spiritual, or not spiritual, but some sort of esoteric form of Judaism, and then it kind of goes down, and then Christianity is anathema down here, only slightly above Islam. But there's spiritual interest, and you can have great dialogues. That you can walk up, and I've done this just in terms of doing some interest surveys, and do a religious survey with students in Prague, and say, now, the first question, why are most 90% of Czech students atheists? I'm coming from the South. You would never ask anyone if they're an atheist, because even if they are, they're not going to tell you. That's offensive. You got to have this religious veneer. And I imagine it's a little bit similar here in the south of Germany, in Bavaria. There's going to at least be a nod to God. Not so. They're not offended at all, and then they start giving you reasons. But the harvest is plentiful. Jesus says so. And sometimes I have to take that by faith. But it really is as you really get to know people. And oftentimes it's our approach that is killing us as much as anything. We're not like a fine perfume. I don't know. If you ever think about the Gospels, there's a message, there's a method, and there's a messenger. And when you think about a perfume, you have some similar things. You have the ultimate essence. That's the message. And then you have the bottle, which could be the method, but then there's this messenger that sends the perfume out, and it's usually some sort of alcohol-based. But if it's too strong, it overcomes the essence. And that's sometimes what happens with us. We have to be more skilled in that. So Jesus gives a second fact. He says, not only is the harvest plentiful, I don't see that all the time, but it really is. I trust him by faith. But the workers are few. There's not a lot of them. And then he gives the logical conclusion. He says, therefore, pray that the Lord of harvest will send out more workers into his harvest. A couple of key points there is that you can't just, they have to come from the Lord, but what we're sending them to is not our harvest, it's his harvest. And that's the work we want to do. But that's the command. Beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out workers. And I don't want to say much more about this. I just want to say, as we think about it, is the Lord sees it as extremely important that we're involved in his mission, and that's the harvest. He wants us in his harvest. Now look what happens. The guy goes out, and he gives them a lot of things in verses, the next few verses down to around 17. He gives them a ton of what would have been above-the-line things, methodologies. He gives them a lot of those kind of things, a lot of external things to make sure they're taken care of, that they're doing things this way. But then in verse 17, we pick back up, and he says, the 72 returned with joy, and they said, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. They were simple men primarily, not real sophisticated for the most part, and to see God use them in this way, to use them in miraculous ways was just blowing them away. Jesus replies, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, and I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome the power of the enemy, and nothing will harm you. They were just overwhelmed. But here Jesus makes a correction midpoint. He wants to shift their viewpoint. In a sense, he kind of drops a little bomb on them, and he says, even in the midst of all of this, the great successful ministry, he says, however, I want to change. In opposite of that, however, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And what he's saying here is that it's really great that they saw good ministry. I mean, it was his ideal. He sent them out. The things that are above the line are good things. But never forget why. That they should really get their inward joy from their relationship with him and have a temporal joy from seeing success. But what Jesus is saying, he says, lasting joy doesn't come from what we do in Jesus' name, but rather from where our name is written in the book of life. Rejoice that your names are written in the book of life. He says that's where the real joy is. One writer says, the personal joy, he says, however, Jesus said the cause for their joy should not come from what they do in his name, but from the fact that their names were written in heaven. The personal relationship of a believer with God should be the cause of our joy, because that's lasting and doesn't depend upon success or failure. Our real joy flows from this relationship. It's eternal, it's permanent, and in fact, actually, this is a present present imperative word, which means it's continual. The verb there, it should be translated, do not keep rejoicing in this, rather rejoice because of your relationship with me. They could rejoice because demons were subject to them, but their lasting joy is from the fact of their relationship with Christ. The former is temporary. We don't always see success in the things we do, but the latter is eternal. Our ministry, it may have success at times, may not have. It may really bring some joy, but our lasting joy comes from our relationship with him. And the principle is this. Jesus wants our delight, our heart of hearts, to be delighted in him more than what we do, even if it's the mission. My delight in the Lord matters more to him than my delight in my delight in the Lord matters more to him than my mission. Now, I'm not saying that mission doesn't matter. He gave us the mission. But he's saying relationship with me is fundamental. And we're going to keep seeing this as we move through the next two little video clips that Jesus has, or Luke puts in here. Keep your finger in Luke 10 and turn over to Colossians chapter 1. Because Paul is emphasizing the same sort of thing here. Colossians 1:29, he writes, I'll go ahead and start in 28. We proclaim him, admonishing and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone perfect or mature in Christ. Okay, there's the mission. And he says, to this end I labor and I struggle. But here's the key. I struggle with all his power or his energy, which powerfully so works in me. God has to work in us before he can work out of us. And that's where we're heading. God has to work in us before he can work out of us. Our mission and our strength for mission flows out of our relationship with God, with the Master. Let's go to this next little section. And this is the ministry of the Samaritan. It comes in as a parable that's given as a result of someone trying to trick Jesus, a lawyer. And I'll start in verse 25. On one occasion, an expert of the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus replies, what is written in the law? He replies, how do you read it? The lawyer answers, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he, the lawyer, wanted to justify himself, and he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? The lawyer tries to trap Jesus. It's pretty with the Jewish law, and that Jesus turns the table as he so often does, and in the answer he gives a right answer. But in that process, and the right answer is the first important and most important commandment, as we just seen, is to love the Lord with all our heart, and all our soul, and all our strength. Only possible, by the way, with the help of the Spirit, that we can love the Lord with that kind of an active love. And then the second, that we love our neighbors as ourselves. That too only possible through the Spirit, to love my neighbors, because some of my neighbors I don't like very much sometimes. Yeah. You live next? No, I don't live next door to you, do I? But what's really worse is sometimes I don't even like myself very much. Yeah, yeah. But sometimes I don't. It's not that my neighbor's the problem; I'm the problem with myself. I don't like me, and only the Spirit can cultivate that love of that's both proper love of self, our appreciation for what God has made, that then flows on how we treat our neighbors. But Jesus, this lawyer is trying to trap Jesus, so Jesus drops a bomb on him. He says, okay, you ask who's your neighbor, and then he gives the story. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and when he fell into the hands of robbers, they stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him as half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. And you guys know enough of the story that the fellow Jews, the religious leader, the priest, didn't want to get defiled, so at least on the surface, that's his excuse. Probably he just didn't want to get involved more than anything else. He's very religious, but he doesn't want to be defiled in his religion, so he doesn't want to touch a dead man, what could possibly be a dead man. So he skirts around, and then a Levite comes, who's probably maybe it could have even been a co-worker in the temple with the priest. They're the ones that do a lot of the setup stuff. He's not going to do anything different than he sees perhaps the priest do. So he goes to the other side. But a Samaritan, one of the hated ones, a half-Jew,